us whenever you are. Just
Like a rocket?
dive our faces right into it. Yeah,
Oh, well,
like
launching
you're
and
like
diving are
our.
kind of different things.
Yeah, right. I'm talking about how you like launch your face into a brick wall when you get stressed out. Uh, so you
Welcome
can
to
think of that
Making
as maybe a
Luck, a
dive,
propulsion podcast
a propulsion podcast, and anger management.
and stress management.
Yeah, so this is a combination of hosts that you may not be familiar with. Uh, Adam's sick, so
Yeah. I mean, he's always like pretty
yeah,
ill, but today he's like, not speaking
he's
sick.
infected with something. Yeah, right.
Right.
He has some kind of bacterial infection that is preventing him from doing the podcast. So we figured
Woo!
that it would be a good time for Wandering Winter and I to both do a topic that he maybe wasn't super warm on doing. So this is a good chance, and we chose tournament, right?
Oh, does Adam not like tournament?
Yeah, I have heard he doesn't, and
Oh,
you
huh.
know,
Who would
yeah,
have guessed?
yeah. So before we get into that, of course, as always, we have our raffle, which Wandering Winder, I'm sure, has prepared. What will they win?
I have a shiny, new, not very shiny penny here. It's kind of grimy. And let's see if I can read the year through the grime. It says 1973, 5,
That
5. I
was a
think it's
good.
1975.
That was a good year, and it can be yours if you win the raffle.
I
Now,
legitimately have
last
this penny
episode,
in my right hand right now.
yeah,
I'm not
and
even
not for
kidding.
long.
Nope, it's not there anymore. It's already gone into my left hand.
Yeah, somebody already. Oh, yeah. So,
Woo!
last
Left hand!
episode, last episode we talked about
It
Curse
was a
Village,
sinister move.
and we talked. It was a sinister move, and we talked about Cursed Village, and we talked about Lost City, and it was one of those dual episodes where we talk about two different cards.
Yeah,
So, of course, the kingdom that we played had both of those cards in it,
that's true.
and I'll go ahead and read the cards off, and also we'll give our analysis on the kingdom. And Wandering Winder, you and I were talking earlier today. I understand you had a different read on it, so I'd like to get into that
Well,
as well.
not so much, but let's start with the cards. So we
Yeah,
had Vineyard,
first.
Foe Rager, Giar, Oracle, Storeroom, Noble Brigand, Plaza, Cursed Village, Lost City, Pillage, Triumph, and Wedding. Once more for our audio only listeners, that's Vineyard, Forager, Gear, Oracle, Storeroom, Noble Brigand, Plaza, Cursed Village, Lost City, Pillage, Triumph, and Wedding. Jake, you want to give your
And
analysis that you gave at the end of last episode?
Sure. So basically, Adam and I both kind of were saying that Lost City and Cursed Village are close here, and maybe you end up getting both in the deck.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that mostly panned out, but we did actually have a little bit of disagreement. I said
Which
that I
agreement?
wanted to open that agreement, and I said that I wanted to open Forager Gear, and Adams was waffling between Forager or Forager Silver.
Mm-hmm.
The reason being the Forager thins a little faster, the Forager Silver is more likely to hit 5, and I thought that the Forager Gear is pretty likely to hit 5 if you set aside cards to make that happen, and you've got the Forager in the deck, and the Gear is fine for a while, so I liked opening with the Gear. Um, I think that Forager lost out for the most part because you didn't hit 5 early enough. But Adam did have some good points. He did like the extra thinning faster, and hitting 5 super early wasn't a priority for him. I think it's pretty good to hit 5 early though. And the Forager Gear, I end up leaning toward it, but it is close between that and Forager Silver.
Yeah, and so here's where my different perspective starts to come in, which is I tend to
Yeah.
not like opening Forager, which maybe we'll get to in the future Mythical Forager episode. But
Yeah.
yeah, basically the reason being that if you trash an estate with a forager on like turn 3, you're probably not making money with it, so you're not hitting your price points. So I like to delay it a little bit in the hope that my opponent will then make the foragers be worth something, and then I can take advantage of that. And in the meantime, I've hit 5 more. Now, obviously, that's like a gross oversimplification.
Yeah,
Um,
that relies on you not needing to thin really quickly, right?
Right. But part of that also tied into my longer, slightly longer term game plan here would have been so I was looking at a gear silver opening because I do want to hit 5. And so then I was going to get, some cursed villages because, like, that's why you want to hit 5. And I think it is a little bit
Sure.
better than Lost City, at least for the first few. Um,
I think it's quite a bit better, but it is close. I mean, sorry, that I just completely contradicted myself. I think the Cursed Village is quite a bit better early, and in the middle it's kind of close. But I do think the Cursed Village kind of won out on this board.
mhm. So in any case, Cursed Village would be what I would be getting on turn 3 or 4 as my 5 cost purchase. And so then, following that, then every time it didn't hit 5, I'd be taking like 3 to 4 foragers because they work pretty well with the Cursed Village.
They do.
And so I'm going to get more thinners to compensate for having later thinning and hopefully have more 5s. So, like, that's the plan. I don't really know if it's good or not. So I haven't played this kingdom against a human, and playing against the bot, there's really only one thing you can learn, which is that the bot sucks at playing this kingdom.
The
Um,
bot sucks at playing most kingdoms, but
right.
yeah,
So like I could just do basically anything and win with a ham sandwich. I mean ham sandwiches are
yeah.
great, but uh,
Hamlet wasn't on this board, but yeah. So the Adam and I played quite a few games against each other, and Wandering Winter has a different perspective on what he thinks the mid and end game should look like. So I think that a little more play is necessary here, and it's convenient because we'll have some time to play it out with him before the next episode. So hopefully we can get a few games with him in and see whether the thing that Adam and I were doing, kind of mirroring each other, wins out, or
well,
whether or not Wandering Winter's read is a little more
so
accurate on this kingdom.
I don't actually think I'm that far off from you. I am a little bit
Hmm.
more into trying to get so we should talk a little bit about what the kind of end game plan is. I think last time you
Yeah.
guys were both talking about Vineyard being important.
Yeah, I
Um,
think we were off on that, but
and I think it potentially could be, but for the most part, the best point source here is Triumph.
yeah,
Um,
definitely. I
so,
think.
but I would advocate a little bit more for going for earlier triumphs than you guys were talking about. One thing that you guys found, according to my discussions with you, is that pillage was actually really important here. Um,
Yes. And we should talk about why, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think this is a kind of a classic example of where pillage can be underrated because you're drawing well enough that it's not a big deal to have all the extra stop cards that you're drawing, right? Um, you end up getting like
Right.
several cursed villages and lost cities and maybe some gears or oracles or something, depending a little bit. But you're drawing pretty well so that you can crack the pillage and then redraw the spoils. At which point it's actually money positive. It gives
Yeah, a little
extra
bit.
it gives extra gains, which help for triumph because you gain the spoils. Um,
Right.
and yeah, so then also, and this is only theoretical to me, but it seemed to be very prevalent to you. Uh, this is the kind of kingdom where nailing the best card out of their hand might really cripple them. I think that's actually true in certain decks in a lot of cases, but it seemed from you guys' experience to definitely be true here. If they only had one of the villages in their hand, like adios
Yeah.
muchacho.
Now that stops being true at a certain point, but the idea is that you get the pillages right before that point, and like it's so the your opponent starts pillaging you, and then they draw their deck and they get another pillage on their turn, and your turn probably sucks as a result because they got the one cursed village out of your hand, and if you've been building around that, well, good luck. Or maybe it was the lost city or whatever. But uh, the thing is that they get to keep having that turn. They're quite likely to kick off again and then get another pillage and pillage you again next turn. So the thing that you're waiting for to get back in it is to basically draw a hand with 2 cursed villages in it, and that can take a while. So your opponent can get a few free turns on you, and that can make all the difference.
Yeah, I imagine it's a little bit like on certain ghost ship boards where you get ghost ship attacked and then you can't do anything, and then it happens again and again, and it's really hard to dig out of the hole because
Right.
you're starting with a 3 card hand that doesn't do anything. And you just need one good
Exactly.
turn, but it takes like 3 or 4 turns to get your one good turn, and then they're running laps around you, and you feel
Yeah,
bad. And
you'll get back in it. It's just how much progress have they made while you were diddling around getting pillaged?
right.
And
So
yeah.
I think the main difference between us is that we're more or less on a similar deck, but I was talking about, well, if Triumph is really the best source of points here, then go for more Triumphs earlier and maybe Estates and run that out. And if you get the Triumphs and they have been dilly-dallying around building more, there's no points left. I don't entirely believe that like you can go super hard on that because you can transition either to province or vineyards. And
Yeah.
if you as the player that's been like running out the triumphs and estates haven't scored enough points from that, then so this deck doesn't deal with green cards very well because it's mostly a draw to X deck, but if you haven't scored enough, then they can deal with them well enough. And particularly you guys were doing the storeroom thing, right? Which
Yeah, we had a lot of storerooms, and we were usually discarding 4 cards at least to our storerooms. So the light switch of our decks was like either you didn't get pillaged or you had 2 cursed villages in hand and you got a bunch of storerooms off and you had like $18 and a billion buys, or they sniped the cursed village out of your hand and you got
did nothing.
like
You had like
three
three
dollars
money and
three
a
dollars
buy.
and a buy. Yeah.
Yeah,
So there were light switch turns like that. It was like you didn't have okay turns. You didn't have a turn or you had a great turn, and so that's part of why Triumph
right.
did factor in so heavily,
So,
because as you alluded to, that deck doesn't really like to have points in it, and it likes to play its foragers to trash the estates and its payload,
well,
yada
and you
yada.
can just gain 1,000,000 points, so the triumph is worth like 9 or something, right? Um,
Well, we most likely, I think the biggest one that we ended up getting was like 7 or 8, because you can't really just like diddle around until you're getting the perfect nut triumph. I mean,
right.
because there is other stuff you can
Well,
be doing to
I
pressure.
was just basing that on, I haven't watched the full video yet, but I was basing it on you saying that you
Sure.
had like 17 or 18 money and 1,000,000 buys. Like, I'd score a
Yeah.
lot of
Right.
points in that turn.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think at the end of the day, the storeroom allows you to have a little bit of green in it be okay because you can discard it for some benefit or value. Um,
Hmm.
and so I think you can't go too fast for the triumphs. And so then it's just a matter of how you're navigating and playing the end game. And, if I go for triumphs now, is their deck built in such a way that they can, overtake me with vineyards? How close are piles to running out? Is the estate pile going to be close enough to being the third pile that works out? And so it gets to be very dependent on how the actual game went, and less of a like overall strategy and more about adapting to the
Sure.
situation, which is great.
Yeah. For
It
the
makes
most.
for a fun game.
Yeah, definitely. I think that this board was pretty fun. As long as now this board it was fun in the sense that we were doing it because like when one of us fell hopelessly behind, we'd just like usually resign and then move on to the next
Hmm.
one. Getting to that point was pretty fun, right? And then usually it was like one player came out way ahead because that pillage dynamic, where they had those few free turns and they got a bunch of triumph points and the estates were gone in the meantime. And then they were both about equally positioned to go for provinces, except one player had 1,000,000 triumph points. And then but occasionally we had these games where both players came out about even on the triumphs, and so at that point it becomes kind of about the vineyards and the provinces and how are you positioned for endgame, and kind of weird.
Yeah.
But I think that this board could warrant some future plays to see, you know, what ends up being the totally dominant strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess we should talk maybe a little bit more, since there was actually a question in the forums about this, about why uh, we kind of preferred Cursed Village over Lost City here. Um,
Sure.
and that's and I should say, I don't actually think that, like, I'm just emptying the Cursed Villages necessarily before getting any Lost Cities. Like, after I have maybe 3 or 4 Cursed Villages, and again, it depends a little bit on how the game's going, but I might start thinking about switching over to Lost City sometime around then. Certainly, if the
Yeah.
pile emptying is going to happen and that's not in my favor, I definitely would switch, because but anyway, the point about why Cursed Village here. The reason being that there is a ton of stuff on this board that helps support that Cursed Village, basically, is a draw to X game plan. So storeroom, like we discussed, forager also, it's non-terminal, which is actually a plus, because even though Cursed Village is a village, you can't have too many
The,
terminals.
well, the
But it's,
first one,
yeah,
yeah, the first one
it's
you play definitely appreciates Forager being non-terminal
right, and it
because you
also
can trash a card and then draw more.
right. So when you play the forager, it removes multiple cards out of your hand. Plaza
Yeah,
hypothetically can help it out, although that
it's okay.
didn't
It's
come
not
up a
great.
ton, I would imagine.
I got a Plaza once or twice, and it was when I didn't have the terminal space to get another storeroom,
Right,
and which was not never.
right.
Like that.
No, for
That did
sure,
happen.
for sure. I could definitely see getting them. I just like the value of it discarding a treasure is not zero, but it's not large, I imagine.
No,
Um,
definitely not.
so, yeah, but there was a lot of support. Gear can kind of be support if you draw it in the right order, for the
Yeah.
draw to X thing, but if you draw in the wrong order, it can be like anti-support. But anyway,
Well, it's a
yeah,
double-edged sword. It
yeah,
can set up your next turn. It can kind of protect you a little bit from pillages, though that's more of a thing that came up in theory than in practice. And I mean, setting aside cards is nice because these draw to X decks need to have these synergistic cards in their starting hand to kick off. But
hmm
then you've got cards in your starting hand, and then you've got a bunch of cards in your hand, and it makes it hard to get value out of your Curse Villages.
Man, I
So.
love having starting cards in my starting hand. Actually, no, I love
Yeah.
having cards in my
Well,
starting hand, not so much starting
not the
cards.
starting ones, right? Yeah,
Unless it's goat, because goat is the goat.
goat is pretty amazing. So I'll take that in just about any hand.
Anyway, I think that's going to do it for our discussion of last week's kingdom, because it's already been way, way too long that we've been discussing this. So let's move on to our
Well, yeah,
topic
yeah, so,
this week.
yeah. So it's tournament, right?
It's tournament, and I think we should start by reading the text of the card. So, tournament is a 4-cost action. It is from the Cornucopia expansion. And the text of tournament reads, +1 action. Each player may reveal a province from their hand. If you do, discard it and gain any prize from the prize pile, or a duchy onto your deck. If no one else does, this is no one else does reveal a province from their hand, then you get plus a card and plus a money.
Yeah. So this is, I think most people would agree, quite a powerful card, and most people might not agree why it's a powerful card. So we're going to go into a little bit of both of that, but the prize pile is part of tournament. So let's just take a quick moment to talk about what's in that. There is one each of the following cards: Trusty Steed, which gives you a choice of +2 cards, +2 actions, $2, gain a bunch of silvers,
A bunch being 4.
etc. A bunch being 4, and you get to
And
choose 2 of those options.
and when you gain the silvers, you put your draw deck into your discard pile, which
Yeah,
I'm
so
sure you remembered
generally,
because it comes up all the time.
Right, definitely. Usually, what Trusty Steed reads is +2 cards, +2 actions. That's what you usually play it as,
Um,
but those other options are there.
and we'll talk more
We
about that
also have
later.
Yeah, we also have Princess, which gives plus buy, and it's like a double bridge. While this is in play, cards cost 2 less.
That's actually a
Then
little
we
bit
have
different from bridge because it is the more modern wording with the while this is in play as opposed to the
right.
when you play it you get the effect. So keep that in mind.
You can't throne it
Well, you
for
can,
shenanigans.
but you only get an extra buy.
Right. So followers, which is +2 cards, gain an estate. Each other player discards down to 3 in hand, and they gain a curse as well. And then we have Diadem, which is a treasure. It's a silver, and then when you play it, it gives you +1 coin per unused action,
It's not
which is a
literally a
weird.
silver for things that care about silver. What he means is it's a
Yeah.
treasure that gives 2 money and then additional money for the unused actions. Just in
Yeah, and
case
that's
one
a
of you
unique.
ruse lawyers is out there, it doesn't count for
Yeah.
like whatever
Merchant.
card that, yeah,
Yeah. So that's a unique mechanic in the game is caring about unused actions to give you money. So I
right.
have actually had 2 games that used it in a broken way. I had the Champion Diadem Dream Turn
Woo!
where I had Champion Diadem, and I had a game where I won because I spent a bunch of villagers and it made my Diadem give me more money.
Oh yeah.
Diadem's the worst prize. You usually don't take this one unless there's like no other option.
Well,
And then
again, we'll get more to that later. It's more of a tactical thing, but it's
sure.
not like I'm gonna take this because it's gonna be the best card for my deck. No, not very much.
Yeah. So, Bag of Gold is +1 action and gain a gold onto your deck. And that's, an action to do that. So,
Right. And all of the prizes cost 0 asterisk, and the asterisk is just because they're not in the supply, so you can't actually buy them. Um, but for things that care about cost, it's 0. So there you go.
yeah. So, Tournament is a card that people have some pretty strong feelings about. A lot of people really don't like this
Adam
card.
Horton.
And
I'm sorry. Who said that?
Adam Horton is one of them, and I'd say that I am actually one of them as well. But I do play with it quite a bit, and I understand you have some stuff to say about that too.
I mean, I think it's fine. I don't have a problem with it. It is the reason why people, I think, dislike it is that it gives, like, basically each of the prizes, there's only one copy of each of them. And
Yeah,
so it can create some feel bad moments where your opponent got the best prize diadem. Diadem's not
yeah.
the best prize, but
They
they,
got that champion diadem combo.
they got whatever the best prize was, and now you can't get it, and so like you're just kind of out of luck, and so people feel bad about that. And I think that's the main source of why people don't like it. Jake, is there some other reason why you don't like it?
No, I mean I'm with you there that there's this feeling of getting screwed over by not having access to this unique card that your opponent does, which stems from the randomness in tournament just being more visible and less subtle than the randomness that you see elsewhere in the game. I mean, that randomness is everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes your money just doesn't line up.
So I
Sometimes
was
you
gonna
open
say,
differently than your opponent.
I think it's
Yeah.
a psychological thing mostly, and that it's
Yes.
easy to see that, like, oh my gosh, the luck of this draw totally screwed me over. But like
But
this can
that
happen
happened
with
in a bunch of other
anything.
games. You just didn't
My
notice it as
mountebank
much. Yeah.
missed the shuffle. Any card missed the shuffle. Like, it's a card game, you know? Stuff doesn't, I
There's
don't know.
luck.
My villages all clumped together and my smithies all clumped together and I had a dud. Like, all of these things happen, and I don't think that tournament is particularly, whatever. And I guess maybe to a larger extent, just like there's cards you don't like probably, but those
Yeah.
might not be the same cards that the other players dislike. Maybe they love that card and they dislike some other card.
Yeah, for sure.
there's definitely a lot of people who actually also really like tournament because it's this like fun, unique kind of mechanic. I'm not the hugest fan of one player having access to a thing and the other player not, but whatever.
You get some new players in the room who are just like getting into Dominion, and you show them tournament, and a lot of the time their eyes immediately go wide and they start to realize just what this game is really capable of in terms of design space, and that gets a lot of people into it. I have some points on tournament. So, like, I don't like the card, and a lot of it is because of the psychological aspect of the randomness of it being very visible. Some of it is about the swinginess of it, because we're going to go into the significance of each individual prize, but sometimes there is a prize that's just really good for that board. And, a lot of the time, first player just gets it because they went first, and, like, that feels bad. But here's the thing. I don't like this card, but I do play with it a lot, and I do take a lot of time to try to get the strategy of it down. When you play a game competitively, and it's up to you to assign value to this, right? It's up to you to decide whether you want to take anything seriously competitively. But when you do
Don't.
play something competitively, and you take and you try to like hone your strategy of it, you don't get to choose the cards you play with, or more specifically, you play in whatever the standard accepted competitive format is at the time. And right now, for Dominion, that means you don't get to choose the cards you play with. Like it or not, that's the competitive format. And there are merits to it too. I actually like that we don't have a ban list, because I think you should actually force yourself to play with cards you don't like for a few reasons. And this applies to any card you might not like. Like, I don't really like Minion or Scrying Pool. People don't like Knights or Swindler or Black Market. But here's the thing. Playing with cards you don't like, it has this knack for challenging the way that you think about the game, and it keeps you from getting stagnant in your thought process. Maybe you've heard the saying before that if you meet Buddha walking down the road, it's your duty to kill him, because that means that you have started to become sure of yourself. It means that you've started to really think you understand what this game is and what it looks like, and thinking that you know what's good or bad for the game. There's a certain arrogance in that, and that can really keep you from getting better. So you should play with cards you don't like to challenge that. And two,
Can I?
like we're wondering,
I
Winter.
really need to.
Yeah,
need to jump in here. First of
yeah,
all,
do it.
I do not condone murder, regardless of whether or not it's Buddha walking down the road. Second of
Sure.
all, I actually, so I think it's okay to not play with cards that you don't like, as long as everybody else also agrees. Um, where
Sure.
I think it starts to be problematic is if you're trying to like impose that on other people. And this is probably the second point you're getting to.
Well, yes, and this is something you kind of alluded to first. Donald X has said many times that a key tenet of his design philosophy is that if he refused to make cards that anybody hated, he would never get to make cards that anybody loved. And you can agree with that or not, but the thing is that design philosophy has carried Dominion to what I think is an extremely diverse and interesting place. So I think that we all owe the game enough trust and faith to play that out and kind of see what these mechanics are that some people love so much.
And I think that's garbage. But at the same time, I like a lot of cards that other people don't. So,
Yeah, so there's that.
so different people like
And
different things, and if it was something that like actual everybody disliked, I've yet to find such a card. But if you know whoever went crazy and they printed a card that was like, zero cost, flip a coin. Whoever wins the coin flip wins the game. The game's over. I think
that card would be 100% fair, actually.
it would be
But yeah, go ahead.
totally fair, and it should totally completely be banned. And nobody should ever
Yeah,
play with it, and nobody would want to play with it because it's just boring to everyone. Now, obviously, like no game publisher is going to print such a card because it's so obviously bad. But my point is, like, if everyone agrees that something is just completely terrible and unfun and just makes the game worse, then okay. I mean, this is why, like in other kinds of card games, you do get cards that are banned because it just like it diminishes overall from the experience. But um, if as long as there's not a consensus of that, then you play with everything as is. And there
Yes.
isn't a consensus about any card, not even really possession. Um,
Yeah, that's as close as we've gotten, I think, right? That's the closest to a consensus that we've gotten,
and I like
and
possession
the
also,
online
so
client.
whatever.
Right. And so like that's even then. Like we actually even have one where we got close to a consensus and the online client banned it.
I don't
And now you have somebody
I
who's
don't
like one
honestly
of
think it's
a
that close
prominent.
to a consensus, but whatever. A lot of people don't like possession.
Sure.
That's another salty soapbox for another episode. Uh, anyway, let's talk
Yeah.
more about the tournament itself.
Yeah, so I just want to say if you don't take these things into account that we've been saying,
Then you're
that's how
wrong.
your infant son that's how your infant son ends up higher than you on the leaderboard. Cough, just saying, cough.
Um,
All right, moving on.
sure. Man, I wish I had
This
an
will be a
infant
good
son.
time for huh?
7? Butter?
Seven. Butter.
Butter
All
sticks.
right, so I kind of forgot what this episode was supposed to be about. You want
It's
to
about tournament, which is
yeah,
hard.
let's reel us back in.
And so first of all, let's talk about tournament just kind of generically. Let's forget the prizes for a second.
Yeah,
Let's just talk about if I open tournament, how good is it? And it's basically a four-cost peddler
and that's
at
quite
that
good.
point. And yeah, it turns out that a four-cost peddler is actually people have like it's a balanced card, but actually four-cost peddler is really good. Like Poacher was a card that got printed. And it's a four-cost
Yeah,
peddler that then later turns into Oasis and then later gets worse. And it's not like a world beater or anything, but it's a pretty good card. It's a pretty good card. It doesn't have any of
yeah.
this prizes
You buy
stuff
it
going
really
on,
often.
right? Um, and so Four Cost Peddler is a really good card. Let's talk about in the opening a little bit of math. Um, exactly in the opening, it's about as good as a silver economically for you, just purely on how much money you're going to get. Like from a money density perspective, or even doing the exact math of all the permutations on turns 3 and 4, if you open tournament silver against silver silver, the percentages of what price points you hit don't change very much. You're slightly, like 0.5% more likely to hit 5 at least once because you're less likely to have stuff miss the shuffle, too much stuff miss the shuffle of your opening buys because you're more likely to see 11 of your 12 cards instead of only 10. You're slightly less likely to hit 6 or to hit 5 twice, but none of these are really huge differences. So it's pretty comparable. And then after that, as the game progresses further, if we're still in a like money density kind of paradigm, right? A big part of the economic benefit of tournament is the card that it draws, and the card that it draws, um, you know, will typically get better as the game goes on because your deck gets better, the vast majority
Yeah,
of the time, right?
you have addressed this in the past on some of your episodes, some of the minisodes you've done on money density. You talked a little bit about
Yeah,
the difference between a peddler and a silver as the game goes on, and I recommend checking those out because they are very good at illustrating sort of conceptually how money density works,
right,
and those principles are very much at play here when we're talking about tournament as well
right.
versus silver.
So long story short, it's almost the same as silver on turns 3 and 4 economically, and then later on it's better. And then as not just economically, it also has a deck control aspect. And in the deck control aspect, it's just basically better than silver, like all the time.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
it's not a stop card.
because it's not a stop card, exactly. So if there are cards that you need to connect and go together, like a village and a terminal draw card, then the tournament is going to be better for you than a silver would be. Obviously, there's often going to be other alternatives besides just silver, so you're going to need to compare there. But yeah, any kind of synergies if you're trying to draw your deck, all that kind of stuff. The tournament is going to be better. So tournament is just like a super solid card that way, even without the prizes. So yeah,
Yeah, all of this comes together to sort of frame tournament as one of those cards that kind of is just generically good. Like we talked about last episode with the Lost Cities. This is a card that is really giving value to any deck it's a part of, and that's of course not respecting this the quote unquote this catch that is this province mechanic. So
right,
there's a lot to say about putting a tournament in the deck, you know, whatever your plans are.
right. So yeah, so there's two aspects to the provinces. One is when you reveal a province and go for the prizes. I'm going to table that for a moment. People focus like all about the prizes, and I
Yeah.
think they miss out on maybe the bigger part of the card, which is if your opponent has a province in hand, your tournament does nothing. Like it
Now,
just turns into a ruined village.
this
Well,
that's
you can
true.
still gain a prize if you also have a tournament in hand, but yeah,
And I want to give you a hard and fast thing, a tip about tournament that is the most important thing that you are going to come away from this episode with, and it is at the very beginning of the game when you are playing with tournament. You right click the tournament, and there is an auto reveal to always reveal province, and that is the correct first move of any tournament game is right click
wrong.
the tournament, click always reveal
No, no,
province.
no, no, no,
Do
no, no,
it.
no, no, no,
Just
no, no,
do
no,
it.
no, 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 no,
Please.
no. No, 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 no. No. You
Okay.
always basically you always block your opponent's tournaments. Usually, there's a few cases where
Well,
I've been like
that's
super
all the auto
tricksy
reveal
and not
does.
done it. But there are like a few edge cases that you don't want to reveal it because you want your opponent to draw a card. Like it's going to trigger them a bad
Really?
shuffle, or the money doesn't matter, or you really actually want them to buy something expensive this turn because you have a hand that you know that you can end the game. Um, like it's kind of weird psychological, and basically if you just always block, you're more or less fine. But I've declined to block their opponents' tournaments before.
Well,
Um,
it's never happened to me, and it sounds like you could lump all of those into counting on your opponent to make a mistake.
well,
That said,
it's not
of course,
necessarily a
you
mistake,
want to
but yes, it's
you want to give them the option to
really
make that
fringy.
mistake. Sure.
It's really fringy. Well, no, because
Yeah.
you have information that they don't, right? You know what's in your hand, and
Sure.
so if you know that because of what's in your hand, that them getting the expensive thing would actually be bad, blah blah blah, or you know them triggering a shuffle, they had to play it because they needed to make the peddlers cheaper. I don't know, but anyway,
Yeah. Well, we've gone into sort of the
super
edge
edge
cases about when
case.
you wouldn't want to
Yes,
block,
you
but of
basically always
course.
block.
Yeah, and that's a big deal for what you said earlier. It turns this card that was the tournament, this generically good card that's giving your deck a lot of value, into a card that is like Ruined Village. It's giving them almost no value. They had to draw it. It turns it from not a stop card into a stop card.
Right.
So that's pretty bad. And it's definitely something you want to think about. The more tournaments your opponent has in their deck, the more important it is to get that first province and start blocking. The more tournaments you have in your deck, the more vulnerable you are to being blocked. And that's kind of like if your deck is like full of chariot races, how vulnerable is that deck to getting to losing all of its chariot races? Well, it depends how much are you leaning on this mechanic.
Man, I
So
would not have
you
compared it to
definitely,
Chariot Race at all.
yeah, I guess Chariot Race draws the card either way, but whatever. So you definitely want to be apprised of the economy from the
I see what you
tournaments
did there.
being
I see what
tenuous.
you did there.
And
Apprised.
uh, you got me.
Um,
I didn't mean to do that actually, but
I know you didn't. That's why I had to
yeah.
point it
So
out.
yeah, this economy can be stolen from you, and that's
Yeah.
a really big
So
deal.
it's first of all, if you're blocking their tournaments, you for sure are at least stopping the money coming in, right? But also, you're like a lot of times you're significantly increasing the chances that they dud. So if they
Yeah.
were going to draw 3 tournaments in a hand, that's 3 cards you've denied them. But more importantly, usually there's a knock-on effect, right? They need to keep connecting different draw cards together, And if these cards that used to be cantrips suddenly turn into stop cards, it's much more likely that somewhere along the way they're going to get jammed up and not find the next village or the next smithy or the next lab or whatever it is that they need to use to continue that combination of cards that function as draw. Um, so it's
Absolutely.
really massive to be able to to block uh, your opponent's tournaments. Um, so that's a huge deal. And we'll get more to how that affects how you build your deck a little bit later on. But we'd obviously be remiss if we didn't go into a little bit more about the prizes. Um,
Yeah, now I think we both agree that the peddler aspect of the tournament is one of the most important things about it. And
Absolutely.
the prize, yeah, now I think there's maybe even a little disagreement though as we move into the prizes and the significance that they have. I will say that I am closer to your position on this as we've discussed it than I am with the quote unquote conventional wisdom on it. But why don't you tell me a little bit about what you think about the prizes?
Well, I think which prize is important and how important the prizes are and all that kind of stuff is actually very dependent, and it changes a lot from game to game, and we'll get into a little bit about that. Um, in general, we'll start very broad and then we'll get more specific. In general, there's
Sure.
the prizes that are the haves and the have-nots, and there's kind of a big gap between them.
Yeah,
There's generally
I've called
considered to
them.
be three good prizes and two what? Um,
Yeah, two that
two that you
the
forget
three.
about.
There's there's the big three, and then there's the two that you take maybe instead of nothing.
Right. So the big three are Trusty Steed, Princess, and Followers. And let's go, I guess, in that order. So Trusty Steed,
Yeah,
like Jake said, is usually like a lost city, which, is a nice segue from our previous episode. Um,
yeah,
but
generic value. Yeah,
let's also realize that Draw 2 and 2 Money is also like a pretty strong card. Um,
definitely.
2 actions and 2 money if you're in some kind of a draw to X scenario or something like that. Or occasionally just situationally can be a very strong card. The silver option gets taken far less than the others, but having the flexibility between all of these, and even the silver option sometimes, if you just really need to ramp your payload up somehow for some reason, and you have like just
Yeah,
tons of draw, like
I
having all of those options is really good, and the flexibility on it is great. Um, it can be if it's hard to get villages in the kingdom, Trusty Seed is a village for you, so it can be really good there. And that's kind of the so one of the things I'll say about the prizes is you often go for the prize which fills the hole that the kingdom presents you. So the
yeah, whatever
hole,
is either weakest or absent in the kingdom,
right?
that's usually the one you take.
The hole that Trusty Steed fills is actions most of the time.
Yeah,
Occasionally, if there's like no gains in the kingdom, and you somehow need to have a lot of gains to help you have some trashing that really feeds through a lot of stuff. Like you can do the silvers thing with it, but that's like I don't want to overstate how important that is. That's like maybe one
yeah.
fiftieth as important as it's a village. Maybe
I
not even
am
that
gonna
much.
say right. I am gonna say that that's absolutely right. The silver option is the one that is least often taken by a lot. But when that is good, it's we should appreciate how good it actually is
Silver's a
because
good card.
like it gains four cards and
Right.
four cards that are not like starting cards. It gains four cards that aren't like coppers or curses or whatever. So like if you do have that insane draw, it gained you 8 money of payload. It gained you just 12 money of trash for benefit fodder, whatever if you're measuring it that way. I mean, so like that's a pretty hardcore gainer.
It insulated
When
your
that
money density really bad from if you're just going to get some kind of sloggy greening in this tournament game where you've already won a prize somehow, which
yeah,
sounds like it
yeah, I
would
was
never
gonna
come
say
up.
that's
But it
kind
does,
of an
like,
odd
I've had it
situation.
come up, not very often, but not never. Um,
I mean, I've had it. I've played a keep game where it basically got me 5 points on keep, so that was
yes.
cool.
So
But
Keep or Palace, I've had it be good for Palace. I'm like, I need to
yeah,
get more silvers. Boom. then I needed to buy some coppers. Um,
We're not still talking about the silver thing because it's very often good. We're
we're talking
talking
about it
about it
because I'm
because
a silver
I think
apologist.
people right, a silver apologist, and I also think people forget it's there.
Yeah,
And when it is good, it's amazing.
right, right.
Yeah.
And the Chancellor effect of putting your deck into your discard is
Oh yeah. I always forgot that it did that.
a thing, I guess.
Sure.
I have never had
I
that
I
come
know
up and be important, um, in a
I
positive way at
I
least.
question why I question why that's even on the card. Like, why did he waste text
I
putting
have no
that
idea.
on the card?
I have no idea. Anyway,
Okay.
the main point about Trusty Steed is it's like a Lost City, which is a really good card, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
let's let's move on to
Oh,
another
the
prize.
other well,
Oh,
actually, no.
okay.
The biggest thing I think about Trusty Steed is that none of these other prizes are likely to get you another prize on that very turn.
Yes, that
So
is
I
important.
think that Trusty Steed is always the first one you take if it's pretty likely that it's going to get you another prize. And this is where some of the
Almost
timing comes
always.
up. And you wrote some notes in your outline about this, about when you actually choose what prize you take.
Yeah, so really important for all the revealy bits, right? Um, when you play a tournament, you are the first person, as the player of the tournament, who either reveals or not whether they're going to reveal a province. Then your opponent reveals. Then, after your opponent, or if you're in a multiplayer game, all your opponents have either chosen to reveal or not, that is the point. Well, then you discard your province if you had one.
Right.
And that is the point at which you choose um, what prize you want. It's also
And that is
important to
super
note
important.
it's also important to note that once you've revealed and discarded a province, you must take something. It's not an option
Right.
anymore. You have to take something. So that
Yeah.
means when you're choosing whether or not to reveal your own province to your own tournament, you don't know whether you're going to draw the card that you're gaining or not. Um,
How, but
but
when
by the
you
time that you
go to
choose
choose it, yeah,
which thing you're gaining, not whether you gain anything, but which thing you're gaining, at that point you do know whether you're going to draw it or not. So,
that matters a lot when one of the other prizes is quote unquote the bombshell, which is just my term for like the prize that's like
whatever happens to
giving
be
you,
best on this board.
yeah,
Yeah.
whatever the weaker absent effect is. The When something other than Trusty Steed is like the best prize, a lot of the time it tells you whether you should take Trusty Steed, because if you're about to draw it, well, then you get to keep continuing your turn and then also get the bombshell prize.
Maybe. But if there is
Probably, yeah.
some other prize that is just like much better, um you need to understand like how much of your deck are you drawing? How much of a risk is it that you don't get back around to redrawing your province or drawing another province before you have to play your next tournament? Um, Also, sometimes, and I guess this is going to be
Right.
the next prize that we talk about, followers, you can sometimes do the multi-province thing or the multi-prize thing with followers as well because it also draws
It's
cards.
harder. Yeah, it's harder because
But if
it
you have
builds
plentiful
support.
villages, then followers can also do it for you. Trusty Steed, you don't need to have the villages, but if you've had, plenty of extra plus actions, then followers can also get you there. Um,
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up followers. I have a bone to pick with followers, and I have
Pick
a
your
bone to
bone.
pick with I have a bone to pick with a lot of people playing with tournament, and I base this just on the player behavior I've seen. Um, I think followers is like one of the most overrated cards in the game. Like,
Overrated.
just like that, it is a powerful card because it's a prize. Don't get
Powerful
me wrong,
Dominion.
but it's competing with. Remember that it's competing with Trusty Steed and Princess, and like followers is not a junking attack. I mean, it is,
Usually.
but like it's so bad. Like it's junking the both of
Yeah.
you, and like you're taking it instead of another really powerful
So,
card. So like it's a discard attack. That's what
right.
followers is. That's why you take it usually.
Mostly followers is like you draw two cards, you make them discard down to three, and if there isn't good trashing, then you score a couple points more than them.
Yeah, sure.
If
You
there is good
you can
trashing, whatever. They're going to trash the
now.
curse, you're going to trash the estate. But it is important to note that in most cases, the estate is as bad for you as the curse is for them, other than a couple point difference.
It's a stop card that doesn't do anything, and like the best case for this
I mean,
when you
there's a lot of good
yeah, I mean,
cases where the estate is a lot better. Like if you're playing a shepherd board, right? Now, first of all, the estate
okay,
is worth an extra point. You can use the green card much better than you could use the purple card. So there's a few exceptions where either because having victory cards isn't as bad as normal, or because um, the estates were already run out, or being able to deny them is important. So if there's something like Triumph or Wild Hunt or something, where
sure.
or sometimes Baron, where the card actual factual estate has some more significance than normal, then that's like a
Woo,
slight difference
inheritance. Yeah,
for, yeah, inheritance. That's a great example, actually. That's probably a better example than all the ones that I came up with. But yeah,
that's true.
basically,
I mean, the fact that the idea that you've bought province and then inheritance and then you got followers. I mean, that
well,
implies
maybe
the
you
game
had
is almost over to
inheritance
me. But yeah,
first, and then you got, well,
sure.
whatever.
You inherited the tournaments. Yeah,
But
but
maybe
the
if there was inheritance around and you've already emptied all of the estates, then you're not actually gaining an estate anymore, but they're still gaining a curse, and then it is a junking attack. But you'll be able to find out when it is a junking attack. You'll be able to see that, right? And most of the
yeah, the
time,
other
just remember that it's junking you as much as them.
big use case for that is when either or both of these are true. There's no trashing, like you said earlier,
Right.
or really bad trashing at
Because
least,
then the 2 points per
or
play really adds up.
right, or the piles are already pretty low, and
Yeah.
it's more of a pile threat, and you can just create this situation. Well, I'm gonna make both of our decks terrible. I'm gonna like make both of us miserable, but I'm gonna have points,
Well,
and
also,
so
when
then
piles, I was gonna say, when piles are low, the 2 point swing is not nothing either.
right, exactly. So
Um,
usually the discard attack is what you're going for. Occasionally these other things matter, but really I want to get across here that this being your first prize, just think,
but
just take a second.
having said that, though, draw two
It doesn't mean
cards
never
and
take it.
discard
Yeah.
down to three is still a powerful effect. And
Yes.
sometimes that's
Yes,
really,
definitely.
really good, and discard attacks can be very devastating. But also know that this
Absolutely.
is even less potent than normal when the discard attack isn't important, because maybe there was another discard attack already. Um,
Yeah.
and or when there's another curse giver, because then you're junking yourself more than them, right? So in those cases,
Yeah,
it can actually
definitely.
just be even like actively worse. So there are cases where it's really good. Most of the time, it's pretty good because two cards and discard down to three is pretty good. But it's not like the
Sure.
be all and end all very often, particularly when there's trashing around. It gets a lot better when there's no
Yeah.
trashing. Let's move on to the
So
last of the big three now.
yeah, princess is what it is, and they used to call me that, but this
Oh.
one is in my opinion, and like obviously this doesn't mean anything without a board in front of us, but I talked about the bombshell earlier.
Mm-hmm.
The prize that's like this is like the clearly the one that you're going for. Princess, in my opinion, is the most often that one, and it's the one that I think people are like underrate the most, just based on player behavior that I see. Based on like them not taking it first. When I'm like, what? You clearly take princess first here, just
Yeah.
because this is a crazy amount of payload, right? I
It's
mean,
yeah, it's a couple different things. One, I think I agree with you mostly in terms of if there is a big bombshell in terms of this card is so much better that having the only access to the only copy of it is going to be a huge deal. If it's going to be a
yes.
huge deal, most often it's Princess. That doesn't mean it's
Hmm.
most often the best prize. I think Trusty Steed is the card which is most often like just generically good on any board. Um,
Yeah.
but Princess is also generically good on the vast majority of boards. and it has a
And why
higher
is
upside
that?
basically. So
Yeah, like
there's a couple of
why is it
cases
like that Princess is pretty much always good?
there's a couple of cases where Princess is really good. One, there's no other plus buy. Princess is amazing in this
Yep.
case. You get to double province, they're going to single province, you're going to win in
Yeah.
a lot of cases. Two, you have tons and tons of plus buy, and there's cheap cards you want. Princess is going to let you get so many more of them because suddenly these 3 costs that you wanted now cost 1. You know, these 4 costs you wanted cost
Right.
2. You can get like 5 in a turn, whereas before you could get maybe 1 or 2, right? So it does a massive difference for you there. It helps you with pile control a lot in that way. But also just like I would like to buy 3 provinces in a turn. Well, if I'm going to buy 3 things in a turn, Princess has effectively made me 6 money in a buy, right? Um,
Pretty insane
it's
for
a
one
lot of
stop
money.
card.
It's a lot of money. Also, because it's a while it's in play, it kind of gets around Enchantress. Um,
Ah.
which is true, but
Yeah.
not
Also
super
gets around
relevant.
program.
Um,
Right.
so it has this huge game-breaking potential. Um, whereas maybe you have everything else you need already. In that case, it's not so game breaking, but it's still pretty good because you're still usually buying 2, 3 cards a turn. So the extra buy and a decent amount of money for the cost of a terminal, like it's kind of like a better wine merchant. Like you don't have to have the extra money to discard it, which if you didn't have to have
And
the
that's
extra
like
money, that's a pretty good card. It's not like
the
I'm going to
worst
go
case scenario
insane,
for
but
it.
well, the worst case scenario is you can't afford the terminal space. But
Okay, sure.
it's
But
the near worst case scenario.
and it's still not very bad. Like Princess, I
Yeah,
think like if we're gonna rank the prizes for no reason because that doesn't mean anything,
right.
but if we're gonna do it, Princess is my number one. I'm just saying, sue
Yeah,
me.
and this gets to the problems with rankings because I'm going to go back to
Yeah,
my
I mean
discussion
it
based
doesn't mean
approach
anything.
where if you just have a generic board and I don't know what the board is going to be, I think that most
Yeah,
often Trusty Steed is the best. But if you
sure.
have to pick a card that is going to have the biggest impact across all boards, then I think I'd agree with you that it might very well be Princess. But
Yeah.
sometimes it's followers
Now
also. So, and occasionally
it can
it's one
be.
of the others, although that's pretty rare if you're just looking at the board.
Now I will say that we're going to talk a little bit later about how often any one of these prizes is game breaking, how often how important are the prizes, but before we and so that'll talk a little bit about Princess versus Trusty Steed a little bit, right? Because
Hmm.
then we get into what the role of these prizes is in the game.
Trusty Steed is
So
trustier.
right. If the role of the prizes is to like win
Be
you the game by
trusty.
themselves,
Oh,
then the princess is probably the one who's best at that. If
right.
the role of the prizes is just to be good cards for you, usually the trusty steed
It's trustier.
is the most
It's
guaranteed value. It's trusty, yeah.
it's steedier.
Trusty's a good word for it,
It
actually.
is
Yeah.
really.
Uh,
I want to talk a
so
little bit more about Diadem and Bag of Gold. So
yeah,
Diadem is the one that I think people forget too much because
it it's usually the last one left, right? I think
yeah,
usually
and
people will take the bag of gold first, and then the diadem is left over.
but I think like Diadem potentially even as the first prize is something people don't think about enough. And it's not because Diadem is the best card for your deck because it very very rarely is. But uh,
Well,
getting a
yeah.
Diadem can be money right now. And sometimes you need money right now. Now, the real hard part for it is that if you really need money right now, Trusty Steed is usually just about as much money right now and a better card. But sometimes it isn't. Sometimes you're going to have a spare action left. So Diadem makes a little bit more money or more guaranteed money. And for instance, I've seen people miss a win because there's
It's
one province left and they don't take the Diadem, which would have guaranteed them enough money to buy province because Diadem doesn't exist in their mind. So think about that. Think about, does this get me to a really critical price point for some other card in the kingdom? And it is possible. Like the prizes are good and the good 3 prizes are quite good, but it's not like they're better than every kingdom card that might be out. If there is some really good kingdom, I need to hit King's Court, I might take the
Yeah,
diadem so I can hit King's Court. If I need to hit goons, I might take the diadem so I can hit goons. If there's some great card that you really need the price point for, maybe it's just province. I don't know. But think about that is the main use for diadem is this will give me money right now. And then the other thing is the two cards that Jake mentioned. Well, the one card and then the other use that Jake mentioned earlier. Champion, sometimes you can make a billion money with
yeah.
diadem, and if you have the plus
I mean,
buys to take advantage
that's
of it,
that's a silly
that's
scenario
the
that
wombo combo.
so rarely comes
And then the
up. Yeah.
villagers, you're usually not going to have that many villagers, except sometimes with
Yeah.
recruiter is the biggest time where you get like just tons and tons of extra villagers, or sometimes academy.
I mean,
Although if you needed the academy, why would you like? You're usually not going to get the
even in
academy
those
just to
games,
combo with diadem. But you maybe
I
maybe you got
rarely.
recruiter to trash and you end up with like 6 or 7 or 8 extra villagers just because your terminal space was not critical and you were trashing a bunch of stuff with your recruiters, so you have a ton of extra villagers, and then diadem might be able to make you like 10 money, which honestly isn't even that great, and princess often makes more money, but whatever. um
Right. I will say that if I am
it
like
feels
almost
great.
never looking at I'm never looking at a stack of like 10 villagers in
Yeah,
my life and being like, yes, I have played this optimally. These are my 10 villagers,
that's what I
and I
do.
needed to have all of them at this
Acting troop
time. Yeah,
diadem
so like,
wombo combo. um
there we go. Don't sleep on it.
we did it, Reddit.
So,
Bag of
yep.
gold. So
So, well, one other thing about Diadem, real
oh
quick before we move on,
oh
is
oh
there's what you said about the money right now and the force winds that you can miss, but it really speaks to people's reliance on heuristic thinking when it comes to forgetting that Diadem exists. Because the other thing is that it usually is the last prize left over,
yeah.
and people like won't take it, or they just won't reveal province for it, or whatever. So like it's like you take it or you take duchy, and there is more of the game where I will take a free silver, even if it's just a silver, and diadem is quite often a gold instead. But I'll quite often take that instead of a duchy.
Well,
Now, of
I
course, if all the prizes are gone, the game is almost over probably. But I'll take a free silver a lot of the time. So
I
like, don't forget the diadem
I
exists.
do want to mention that it is not that uncommon for it to be good to not take diadem over nothing. Um,
Sure, it
if
puts a silver on top of your
it
deck
puts it
if
on
you're not
top
going to
of your
draw it.
deck, and sometimes what you really need to do is draw some other specific card, particularly because the game's about to end, and if the diadem's on your top of your deck, you're not going to draw that other specific card. So it has both
That's
pluses
true.
and minuses in the right now impact. Um, there is one other kind of combo-ish kind of thing for diadem that I want to briefly shout out, which is keep. Um, it's 5 points
Yes,
with keep.
yes.
So
Yeah, tournament in general tends to make the tournament prizes in general tend to be pretty important with keep, because you think about it, the princess doesn't really do a lot, the followers doesn't really do a lot, at least for keep in particular.
right,
But three of the prizes are pretty much guaranteeing you those keep points. The bag of gold is gaining gold really easily.
yep,
The trusty steed is getting you a bunch of silvers, and
yep,
the diadem is diadems. So
right. Basically, don't take duchy over diadem in a keep game ever.
please don't do that. Yeah.
Someone's gonna
Right.
educate me with this duchy duke tournament board, but yeah.
Oh man, Wolf Den. Yeah, but
Um,
yeah.
anyway, bag of gold. So bag of gold gains you golds. They also go on top of your deck, so you're gaining all kinds of stuff on top of your deck. Um,
Yeah,
Part of the
right.
problem with bag of gold is that when you're trying to gain extra treasures, pretty often Trusty Steed does that and other stuff for you. So like part of the problem with
Right.
Diadem is that Trusty Steed often obsoletes Diadem because it can be money now also. Part of the problem with Bag of Gold is that Trusty Steed often obsoletes Bag of Gold, at least as the first prize. Sometimes the other prize is already gone, right?
Yeah,
Somebody's
I
already taken
mean,
Steed. There are a few other cases for Bag of Gold I do want to mention though too. So there's some
treasure.
cases that just getting 1 gold is better than getting 4 silvers because you don't have that much extra
Yeah,
draw, but you do want to increase your payload over time. Um, Usually you're still going to prefer Trusty Steed because it is more draw to let you do that also. But it can come up. The bigger deal, though, is that if there's some kind of trash for benefit kind of scheme that you have
Yeah,
going on, remodel or salvager or apprentice or something,
any
then
trash for benefit effect loves
which which
any gold gainer,
which cares
because
about the cost of the card usually. So like I'm not talking
yeah,
about you trade route.
gold gainers in general are really good with trash for benefit because gold is the most expensive named card that they gain, just by default. So, any kind of
Dominate
trash for
says
benefit effect
hello.
we're talking about, like, huh?
Dominate says hello.
That's wait, is that a gainer?
It
I guess
it
it does
specifically
say
names that
it
you
says
gain a
gain on
province.
it. This is true.
Edge
But in
case.
general, you're looking at things like ritual and bishop,
Yeah,
etc. So like or salvager, things like that. You're going to
right,
get a lot of value out of the bag of gold in
right.
those cases.
And then last but probably least is Duchy. Duchy isn't technically a prize. It doesn't have the prize type. By the way, all the other five do have the prize type on them, which is relevant for, I believe, exactly courtier. Also, don't forget that you can take a Duchy, and sometimes even before some of the other prizes, sometimes before any of the other prizes, you should take a Duchy because it's the end game, and sometimes a duchy is really what you need because 3 points is 3 points. Now, pretty often, three
Yeah,
points isn't that good, but sometimes it's a very specific situation where you're like, you know what? I need to score 3 points. If I score 3 points, my opponent won't be able to end the game, or I'll be able to end the game with a lead, or it'll just position me better. It's completely a tactical position. I've had like one game where I went into Duchy Duke after having provinces and tournament to connect them. It usually doesn't work very well because you have to have tournaments and provinces and then go to Duchy Duke. It's just like doesn't work really. I think I've had it one time and I
yeah,
played like 20,000 games of Dominion, most of which have had both of these cards in them more often than they show up now. So like do not count on that. But yeah, basically it's just like a tactical, do you need 3 points right now? Well, you can gain a
yeah.
duchy.
Well, if you were gonna have to buy that duchy for whatever position you're in,
Yeah.
you think about the amount of payload that gaining that duchy is. Like $5 in a buy. I mean, it doesn't give you $5 in a buy, obviously, but but if you were gonna have to buy that duchy, giving you the equivalent of $5 in a buy, like we think about this when we have count as well. Like that can be if you want to gain duchies, anything that just says gain a duchy on it tends to be really powerful for that effect because it's a lot of
Oh,
payload
for
as long
sure.
as you are willing to spend it that way.
And so the thing is, you're not going to be getting a tournament because I can gain a duchy with it.
Yeah,
But you have a
it's not a
tournament. You have a tournament anyway, right? And
yeah.
having that as an option on it is really good. And it's just like you're talking about, right? With count, you didn't get the count to gain a bunch of duchies, probably, although it's more likely than with tournament.
Yeah,
Or
it's
same thing
I've
with
seen it
like
happen. That's weird.
altar or any of these other cards that can gain any card costing up to 5 or something, right? Um,
Yeah.
like usually it's not I'm gonna get them so I can get duchies, but the ability to be able to get duchies in the end game can be really valuable, and it's the same case with tournament for duchy.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, okay, I want to go to some quick hits before we talk to the like how do you build your deck differently because tournaments around. Um,
Sure.
so we talked a little bit earlier about the mechanics of the ordering of things, and you have to take something once you reveal. I will note as an addendum to that, and I probably should have mentioned this earlier. So, apologia. Um, if you reveal your your province, you have to choose to take something, but you can choose to take a prize even if there's no prizes left. At which point you don't have to
Yeah.
take a duchy, and you can choose to take a duchy even if there's no duchies left, at which point you don't have to take a prize. Um, that will
Yeah.
almost never come up, but it can come up. Usually, you wouldn't have discarded the province anyway, except maybe like all of the prizes are gone. You reveal province because if you can draw the duchy this turn, you're going to take it, but you don't want to ruin your next turn by having it on top of your deck. So since they revealed, then you're not going to gain the duchy. It's super
Or
thin.
draw to X. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super thin, but it can come up. We talked about there's only one of each prize, which can lead to some feel bads. It can lead to denial strats also, but usually that doesn't matter because usually if princess is really good, then sure you can get one to deny your opponent. But if princess is really good, it's probably more important that you have it in your deck and not just like I'm only getting this to deny it to my opponent. Um,
So
that
that's an interesting point,
can
and
come up.
I'm not gonna interrupt you because I know you have some more, but do want to. Let's put a pin in that and come back to it
Well,
because
yeah,
I want to
no.
harp on that.
I want to mention it is important to deny them if it's also like it's pretty often that it's good for both of you and you getting
Yeah,
it means that it's good for you and denying it is also good for them. I'm saying
for
there's
sure.
usually not independent value of, well, I wouldn't have gotten this princess, but I really need to deny it to my opponent. Like
Oh yeah,
usually
yeah, that doesn't happen.
usually
Yeah,
it's like it's just a really good card on the board and you want it and they want it and you're going to get it. It's usually not, well, I didn't want it, but I want to deny them. Like
it's
that
not
doesn't come
like
up very much.
yeah, yeah, for
The
sure.
so the biggest
That's absolutely
the
valid.
biggest reason that denial comes up might come up would be like, well, I'm over terminaled this particular turn. The best prize in the long run for us is going to be either princess or followers because it's terminaled. And so normally I
Yeah,
would get Trusty Steed because I have too many terminals in my hand right now. But because I need to deny them, I need to ensure that I'm the one that gets the followers or I'm the one that gets the princess. I'm going to get that right now, even though I can't play it this turn because I don't have the terminal space, instead of getting Trusty
yeah.
Steed right now. That's usually
Now,
the extent of the denial impact, as like in terms of how it affects how you play, is that you might get a better card a little bit sooner, even if you can't take advantage of it immediately. Um,
for sure, and I think that that really speaks to the fact that that's pretty uncommon. I think speaks to a point that you have made in the past, and that I definitely agree with, which is about how the prizes in general tend not to be as game decisive or high impact as maybe they get credit for being.
yeah, I mean, I think prizes are good cards. Uh, there's usually going to be a prize that's very good. Getting a prize is good. Um, most of the time, I want to say there isn't the quote unquote bombshell like you're talking about. Um,
Yeah,
and so if they get a prize and you get a worse prize, it's not that big a deal. Um,
I agree 100%. Now, that said, I will say that the prizes are still a very important part of tournament, and it's
oh, for
not
sure.
because and I think that the prizes can be game decisive. I will say that I don't think any prize is game decisive, but I do think that prizes can be
Well,
because
I do want to
yeah,
say I think sometimes any pro- there are some cases where a prize is game decisive. You know, I
yeah,
have I have we each have 5 workers villages in our deck. Piles are kind of low. I get princess and I suddenly can buy out 8 estates and boom, that's the game. Um,
that can happen. Yeah, that can happen. But like, I'm talking about these common cases where like when there's tournament and there's some other really powerful thing you want to do,
yeah.
a lot of the time you find yourself needing to go for the tournament anyway and do that. Respect the tournament first. Even though that like these other effects are available, is the tournament why are the tournament prizes so obligatory to go for? Why do you actually need to put this province in your deck? And it's
You
not just about
don't.
blocking your opponents.
Yay.
Well, you kind of do a lot of the time, and it's not because you need to rush for one particular prize, but you think about these uh, cards. These prizes are really good cards, and
They are good
getting them
cards.
means your opponent isn't getting them, and so it's not
That's
about
also
any
true.
one powerful prize deciding the game. It's about that huge swing in value of being able to get these things that your opponent can't get now,
I mean,
and that's the part that can be the crux that's worth playing around.
I think it
It's not about
depends. It depends
yeah,
very heavily on what the other powerful thing is that you're doing.
sure,
So
it
like
definitely
if I'm building up to play 7 goons in a turn, then sure, I'd love to be able to get Trusty Steed, because Trusty Steed's going to be a good card in that deck. But
Yeah.
if my opponent gets Trusty Steed, there's some other villages in draw, I'm going to be okay. If they get Followers, I don't care that much, probably. If they get Diadem, I don't care that much. If they get Bag of Gold, I don't care that much. If they get
Sure.
Trusty Steed, they get all the other prizes, I don't care that much. I kind of wanted the Trusty Steed, and the rest of them, whatever.
Now that's fair, but like Goons is a pretty extreme example because
Goons
Goons
is
is like one
definitely
of
an
the
extreme
strongest,
example.
strongest cards in the game. But like we're
Absolutely.
talking about when we look at a deck that has like all the prize, like if you just let your opponent run rampant and you don't really contest the prizes at all, your opponent has free reign of this pile, and they have access to this village that draws cards. They have this discard attack that is also kind of a junking attack. They have plus buy with cost reduction. They're getting a gold every turn, and that doesn't sound like a deck I really want to be up against.
For
So if
sure.
my only
But
way of not being up against that deck is to steal some of those powers for myself, so be it. Like, and that's I don't think any prize is usually game
yeah,
decisive, but prizes can be as a whole.
I don't think that we disagree so much. I guess my point is it depends on what
Yeah.
the alternative is, and
Yes.
you're right. Prizes are strong enough. Forget about the cost. If you forget about the cost, prizes are
Yeah.
stronger than the vast majority. One of the prizes, at least, is going to be stronger than the vast majority of all other
The
kingdom cards in the
kingdom.
game. And so
Yeah.
probably then, all the other things. And probably multiple of the prizes will be stronger than any at least particular kingdom card that's on the board. Now, sometimes there's a few other cards that are just anyway stronger, goons or king's court or something, that you can maybe
Sure.
ignore prizes for because they're just so powerful. And then also sometimes the individual card isn't strong enough, but the game plan is strong enough that you can kind of ignore it because yes, you're getting these super powerful individual cards that are prizes, but I'm have some coherent game plan that will end up winning anyway. And
I'm gonna say when that's the case,
it's
that
not
game plan is more often like a money-ish front-running strategy that is like ending the
oh,
game before the prizes are winning, right?
well, maybe. I was thinking more of like some very powerful combo. But yeah,
Okay, yeah,
it's usually
that too.
it's usually a fast thing. I will agree.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, I mean, I I don't think I particularly disagree with you on content because I think I would
sure.
say it depends on the power of the power level of the other thing you're doing, and prizes are strong enough that like you would they're stronger than most other things that you would be doing. But a
For
lot of it
sure,
also
yeah.
depends on how your deck is built. I do want to make two last points before we talk about that how your deck is built, which is that
Yeah,
prizes cost 0. We talked about the type thing earlier, which basically only mattered for courtier. Prizes costing
yeah.
0 kind of matters for trash for benefit stuff, but you usually wouldn't be trashing your prizes anyway, so eh.
Don't
The
do
biggest
that.
thing
Yeah,
that it matters for is Swindler, because you can turn a prize into a
yeah,
curse, which feels amazing.
yeah. I've had it
Um,
happen to me more than once.
it feels amazing. Swindler is
It's
great, which
an
is why
experience.
people love Swindler just like they love Tournament. Um,
Yeah, you should play with cards that you love,
but the last
which is
thing,
what we said earlier at the beginning of this.
and the last thing, and this one's actually important, is play order is actually kind of important with Tournament in a lot of cases. So one
Yeah,
thing is you don't want your tournaments to get blocked. If you can manage to play a discard attack before you play your tournaments, you would very much like to do that because that forces your opponent to either discard the province that they had in hand, in which case you're not going to be blocked anymore, which is really good for you, or they have to keep a province in their hand after they've discarded to your discard attack, so their hand is going to be pretty crummy, which is also really good for you. So that's a nice little thing that
yeah,
you can do there. There's
it's pretty
also
powerful.
There's also sometimes that you want to play other drawing cards before you play your tournament if you're trying to connect it with a province to get a prize. Sometimes you keep a province in your hand with some kind of a sifting effect so that you can maybe connect it to get a prize later on. A lot of this has to do with prizes. The other big thing, though, is sometimes you want to seed your next hand with a province if you're able to do that. Sometimes that can be used again to line up your own tournaments, but more to the point in my mind is to block your opponent's tournaments, because usually the way that you can block them is just you have to get a province and then kind of hope that it's in your starting hand and you don't have much control over it. But now and then as you play a lot of Dominion, you realize that there's certain ways to seed your next hand. Usually you want to do it with like a village and a smithy so that you can get your draw going. But you can also do the same things to seed your hand with one copy of province, and that can be really nice. So sometimes it's like a combination of multiple cards, but there's also a few single cards that can do it kind of by themselves. Note that
Yeah.
Haven does not work, Gear does not work, so the durations don't work that way, but you can put it back on top with something like Courtyard, you can save it. So there's a few ways to get it through, and that can be really nice, both for lining up your own stuff, but also for blocking your opponent's tournaments. And that can be a really big deal. So look out for those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other thing that I think that is worth talking about, it's kind of hard to talk about it. So like we can't spend that much because it's so board dependent.
Right.
Is like the post prize game. Like, and what I mean by that is the phase of the game after prizes have started flinging around. Like, let's say you've got your tournament in your deck and you've got your province. Um, Whether or not prizes have actually left the pile, what do you do from there? What's your
Well,
game plan?
also
That's hard to say.
also earlier, right? Like how do you build your deck in order to get to that point,
Yeah.
right? Do you want to go for
Well,
province much earlier? Do you want to just bail out and get province as fast as possible even though you're not drawing as much? Do you want to make sure that you draw really
yeah.
well so that you can, by the time you get a province, you can connect it and get a like what do you want to do, right? And it's very
Your
board
answer to that
dependent.
question, yeah.
Um, my general answer is you mostly want to build your deck more or less how you otherwise would, with the exception, I mean, there's a few things that if it's very close, you might do. Like, you might get a little extra sifting. Like you pick up a warehouse over some other card that was almost as equally as good, because it helps you connect your tournament and your province together. So it's like a really small thing. But in terms of significant thing, the biggest question is like, do you change when you get your provinces, right?
I,
And
I think the answer is usually yes, and that comes down to a mix of the aspect of contesting prizes, getting the good prize, and blocking your opponent's tournaments,
right,
right?
so and
Like,
I would say that the answer is usually no, but I think that the difference is not about so much that Jake and I disagree about when you should be getting provinces, as much as I normally get provinces earlier than Jake to start with. Um,
right. This is also just like a gameplay philosophy at this
so
point. Like,
there's
your play style is very much fast and aggressive greening.
so in the mini-sode on green speed and when you get your provinces, which has not yet been released but is excellent because the person who recorded it is very smart and handsome. Oh, and don't forget
Humble.
humble. Yeah.
Right, don't
Uh,
forget that.
yeah. So that person makes a point in that mini-sode, that there's a lot of factors that go into when you stop building and when you start getting points. And the rule of thumb, right, basically is that if you're able to draw your deck pretty well, then you will often build to do that and then move towards. This is a gross oversimplification. Refer to the mini-sode, but you build usually to about double province. Um,
Sure.
and if you're building to double province, then and on a tournament board, you should probably not do that. Tournament is one of the things that would say, okay, well, I'm drawing my deck and I can get single province. Just get the single province because the prizes are going to be both a between the chance to block and the chance to win a prize. That's going to be a bigger deal than the efficiency of getting 2 provinces at once. Because
Yeah,
like the arithmetic behind getting 2 provinces versus one is usually actually not that much in favor of double provincing anyway. It's like you
and
usually build to double, but it's kind of close. And the
well,
prizes are a big
the
swing.
reason you do it is because you don't want the reason that you build a double province usually
Is because you
take
don't want
longer
the
to
province in your
build a
deck
double
for as
province.
long.
Yeah, it's because you'd rather have these good cards in your deck and have your deck have agency.
Right.
But the thing is that in a tournament game, the role of the province has changed. The
Right.
province
It's
is
a much
giving your
better
deck
card
this,
in
but
your deck.
agency isn't taking away. It's not just points; it's also a thing that your deck
Right.
needs.
It gets you prizes and it blocks your opponent. So it does more stuff for you
Yeah.
than just being points. So that's important thing number one. Do you build a different style of deck? Now this is also a very interesting question. Maybe. It kind of
Well,
depends on what
it's hard to
tools you have,
say.
right?
Yeah.
So if you have like really strong trashing, you're going to be able to easily build a deck that draws itself, then you probably still want to build that deck. And then it's just a question about how many tournaments do I get? Probably not too many because you don't want to, in that kind of a deck, it's much more likely that you're going to get blocked because your opponent's probably building a similar deck and they're more likely to have a province in your hand. And so you could just be adding more copies of Ruined Village. So you probably still get
Yeah.
tournaments for sure, but you don't want to get like 5, right? Um,
But if you don't have that trashing, a lot of the time you have to, if you refer back to our cycling episode, you do these things that help you line up province and tournament in a way that's going to help you contest prizes and be a threat for that. And one of the ways you do that is spamming. Getting a bunch of copies of both is sometimes the only way you're going to reliably connect them. So
right.
sometimes you get a bunch of tournaments for that
So
reason.
if the deck control is weaker, I actually tend to this is more where this is my bread and butter, right? I tend to
Yeah.
if the deck control aspects aren't particularly strong, I will often not build to try to draw my deck. Well, in general, but even a little bit more in particular on a tournament board because it gets me to province faster, which somehow gives me better chances at getting earlier prizes to some extent. Although because my deck control is lower, it's
Yeah.
kind of not that likely that I'm going to line up my tournament and my province.
Usually
And I'm not going to
it
go out
comes
of
out
my
in the wash
way.
and about even.
Yeah, and I'm not going to go out of my way to get a tournament over like a particularly better card for my deck just so I can line it up for province in that kind of a deck because in that kind of a deck you're not going to see the prizes often either, right? You're going to see it once a shuffle, and once a shuffle in that kind of a deck is going to be once every 4 turns or something maybe.
Yeah,
And
it's slow.
and so I'm probably going to see the prize 2, 3 times over the course of the game, maybe. Um, and so it's not as big of a deal. Whereas blocking is always a big deal. Um, but getting the province earlier also is going to be this imposition on my opponent that it's going to be harder for them to get their business done. And it
Right.
does. This is another case where it can be swingy because if I'm building this kind of a deck, and a lot of quote unquote strong players, quote unquote, don't quote unquote like quote unquote building quote unquote this quote unquote like. No, I'm
Quote
going to stop
unquote
doing that.
province. Yeah.
That kind of a deck, right? Because they like to
Yeah.
have control. They like to be able to set it up just like they like. And sometimes I am more than happy to just roll the dice. And if 60% of the time or 55% of the time it's going to work out better for me to just like, I hope that the stuff comes together where my money comes together well. And I hope that the stuff comes together that my province lines up with their tournaments, and even better if it can line up with
Right.
mine. If that's going to be a little bit better on average, but there's a huge variance, I'm okay with that. And sometimes you have to
Yeah.
be. And it can feel bad, but that's, I play fast. You just play another game, man.
I know, right? Yeah, that's a lot of what how dealing with the luck aspects of Dominion can be coped with is just understanding like Dominion is a pretty fast game. It's
Yeah.
okay. Like
Um,
you can just play another one.
so I do want to mention the more tournaments your opponent has, the more likely you want to be to get the earlier provinces, even at the cost of your own deck control or other goals that you have, because it becomes increasingly more important to be able to block them the more tournaments they have. The more tournaments
Yeah.
you have, it's a little bit more important to get a province because you can get a prize, but it's not as big a deal as for the blocking. Um, and like I say, I usually don't end up getting like 5 tournaments. Uh, there's 2 reasons for that. One, I'm sometimes a little bit worried about them getting blocked. Two, more important,
Right.
um, there's other good cards too. Like tournament's a good card, but it's not like, you know,
Yeah.
um,
So this is that's an interesting point because a lot of the time when we come back to that original question, which is okay, I have the tournament in my deck, I have the province in my deck. What do I do now? Do I keep provincing
right,
or not? It's like a lot of it depends on like what else was going on in this kingdom. What deck have I built up until now? Did I get the province because I've built a deck that provinces? Or did I get the province because I quote unquote spiked for it? Did I get that province really early because it's a priority to get value out of my tournaments from prizes and block my opponent's tournaments? So, like, did I build a deck that's going to hit 8 consistently if I just keep provincing now? Um, am I going to be able to keep doing that until the end of the game?
right.
Normally, when I put a province in my deck, it's because I'm ready to keep greening until the end of the game. But with a tournament, sometimes I've done it quite a bit before, so I have to answer that question. And I've also, it's deciding what you do after the in the post prize phase of the game, quote unquote.
Well, it's like the mid-price phase. It's not like they're all gone, right?
Yeah,
If they're all
right,
gone, you
right,
better be scoring some points pretty fast usually, because the
right,
game
yeah,
is about over.
exactly.
But
So like in that post prize phase, what else is going on in that kingdom, and also how did my deck get this province to begin
right. And
with?
I think the rule of thumb that I tend to go with is if I got the province because I wanted to get prizes for myself, I'm not super keen on getting a lot more provinces. Because
Sure.
one province can get me any number of prizes, and probably I'm not, just um, like getting an extra province. It depends. Like if I'm playing a moneyish deck, then getting the extra province is going to increase my chances of getting the prizes more. But if I'm playing a moneyish deck, it probably wasn't as much about getting the prizes. And if I'm playing a
Yeah,
moneyish deck, then it's less true that I'm only going to green when I'm going to green and do nothing else, because you mix and match building a little bit and greening a little bit more normally in moneyish decks. Um,
and the province has the distinct advantage of being worth 6 points at the end of the game.
Yes. The other thing, but on the flip side, if I got the province to block my opponent, um, either A, I have some way that I can like continually have it in my starting hand, like that courtyard that we talked about, so I can
Sure.
block them continually with one, or then yes, I'm going to get more because most of the time you don't have a
Right.
way to do that, and if you need to block them, you really need to block them. You're just going to keep provincing whenever you can. I tend to find I tend to build more moneyish decks, and so more or less I often get pretty close to just provincing when I can anyway. Sometimes I would want to build a little bit more, and tournament leans me towards just province because it kind of sort of is building also, and kind of sort of is attacking your opponent's tournaments. But yeah, if you're building more of a drawing deck, then you're usually going to be slower to get the first provinces, but you can line your tournaments up with those provinces more importantly. So if, or more consistently, so if there is a particularly important prize, then that high deck control deck is going to be better able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So I think we've gone into most of the aspects that I could think of to cover with tournament, and it's a pretty exhaustive card to cover because the role it plays is kind of dependent on the game, on the board it's in. But usually it's important pretty much all the time for various reasons.
Yeah, and
Is there anything else you want to cover?
we've
Yeah.
made our editor very happy. That's what I want to cover.
Oh, definitely. I think we actually have, because now he will never hear either of us bug him about during a tournament episode ever again. Which
I don't think
I
I've
think, although
I don't think I've ever bugged him about
oh,
doing a tournament episode.
I have, I've been bugging him about it.
Oh,
But
okay.
the of course detriment to him is now he may have to play a kingdom with tournament in it
Well,
for the podcast. So
yeah, I mean, also he has
that'll
to
be
listen
fun.
to all of our nonsense for the last insert appropriate amount of time that the podcast has been edited down to here. Anyway,
Yeah.
you alluded to a
So
kingdom. So,
yeah, this kingdom is really interesting, and I'm excited to play it. And the reason I'm excited is because I have no idea what you do to start out here. So I'm going to do my best to analyze this after we read the cards in it.
yeah,
But okay. So these cards: Marauder, Tournament, Workers Village, Charm, Forum, Governor, Jester, Journeyman, Relic, Tragic Hero, and we have the event Annex. Once more for our audio-only listeners, we have Marauder, Tournament, Workers Village, Charm, Forum, Governor, Jester, Journeyman, Relic, Tragic Hero, and the event Annex. Oh boy.
and because Marauder's out, there's Ruins, and it's very
Yep.
important to note that Ruin Village is the top ruin.
Yes,
That doesn't matter at all.
because it lines up with your tournaments, right? So, man, there's like 6 things you need. Okay, so first off, there's nothing here that costs less than 4. So on a 4/3, the other one is a silver. Yeah, okay. So
I'm gonna open Ruined Village. No.
yeah, there we go. There's like 6 things you need to start doing here, and you need to have done
Well,
yesterday. There's a
there's-
chunking threat. There's tournament. There's governor. What do you? This is gonna be a fast game at the
there's
very least.
no real thinning here. You can
Yeah.
governor to remodel your ruins into estates. Yay!
And then remodel those estates into tournaments so that they're not stop cards.
So
or
there's
workers'
a few
villages,
there's a few major kind of things to note. Forum can kind of work to help you connect your business with your business.
Yeah.
So that's one thing.
So I mean, I think spamming journeymen and workers' villages is probably more likely to be effective in that regard, but we'll see. I mean,
Interesting. So I wasn't sure.
actually, I like Tragic
I was gonna
Hero
say there's
more
Tragic
than-
Hero
I like
also.
Tragic Hero more than-
So there's a few things.
Yeah.
Workers Village Tragic Hero gives you a lot of buys, which might mean that if you can win a princess, then it's very misogynistic middle Dark Ages culture if you're winning a princess as a prize.
Yeah.
And you can't
like
ignore
1600
theme.
experimenting.
You can't ignore theme.
Or you're just gonna lose.
You're just gonna lose.
Okay. So
But Workers
the
Village
Journeyman
Tragic
can skip
Hero,
up,
and then you get Princess. That you're gonna have a ton of buys, and you might just be able to just like empty piles and end the game, right? Because Workers Villages might be low, Tragic Heroes might be low, Ruins might be low. You empty estates, Forums get cheaper, and those are already plenty of plus buy. Like that's potentially one set of synergies that's going on here, right?
That's true, but this is also a governor game.
Right. So that was going to be the next thing I go to. So there's also Governor, and Followers is a discard attack, and it's even better here because there's no real trashing. So the estate versus vis-a-vis the curse, they're both sticking around in your deck, but it's a discard attack for your governor. So you draw like 4 times with governor, you connect your tournament with your province because you've drawn a bunch with your governor, and then you play followers and they're back down to 3 cards. So that also seems strong.
I think that because of that, this is one of the rare kingdoms where I am actually concerned about getting followers first. So I think I'm taking followers as my first prize because of the synergy with governor.
but there's
Um,
also
and it
no
just being
real
a different
thinning,
effect.
and
There's
there
no
is
thinning.
junking with Marauder, so maybe you want to do that and just kind of, because there is junking and no real thinning, you kind of just play money-ish and do some stuff with tournaments and just good cards wherever, and don't try to line too much of your
Yeah,
business up because that's going to be hard to do, right?
yeah. So there's a trap with that governor followers thing where you play a bunch of governors for draw, and then you
You
don't,
don't
and
find
then
your
you don't find your
followers.
followers,
Yeah,
which is
feels
sad.
feels amazing, man.
Yeah, I mean, like you drew a bunch of cards, so ideally there's some good stuff in that hand, but you did a lot for your opponent.
And then
So,
there's also Annex. And Annex, you
well,
think I'm joking, and I'm mostly
no, I'm
joking,
not.
but it
I
can help you
Annex.
line up your business.
I was actually about to say that. I was actually going to say, like, the tactical annex is usually a meme. Like, normally I'm like, oh man, you got to get that tactical annex. It's like when you talk about zoning in, like, an FPS game. Usually it means you
I
just
never
missed. It's
talk
like,
about
oh, that
zoning
was a
in an
zone.
FPS game.
Yeah, it's like you or like a fighting game or whatever. Usually when you talk about zoning, you're actually just saying you missed. Like, oh, it was a zoning shot. No, you just missed. Whatever. But the but in this case, the annex, the tactical annex, is less meme worthy because like. The deck is so sloggy that it might actually be the main way you're going to
So,
line up tournament and province if that's
so
your goal.
there's a few questions that I mainly have here. One, do you open
Yeah.
Marauder? I think you do.
And I think you do as
I
well
don't think you
because
get a
like the
second
junking
one.
threat. No,
And Ruined
I
Village is
think
on
like
top.
yeah, I think that you open the Marauder and you're not getting the second one mostly because like you're not so much trying to flood your opponent with junk. You're trying not to take 10 ruins, and that's like the big deal.
Right,
I
and
mean, it's all the above, right?
the comparative difference, each additional Marauder adjusts that less and less, right? The second Marauder, the
Yeah.
first Marauder gets you from 10-0 to 5-5. The second Marauder gets you from 5-5 to like 6-4 or 7-3. It's not nearly as big of a jump, right? And
Well,
there's
the
other stuff that
question
you could
would
be
be,
doing.
are the spoils
And
are the spoils a good card for your
well,
deck? And the answer is yes, but they're not that
spoils are good, but there's also other cards. First of all, you have terminal space issues, right? Marauder's
good.
terminal,
Yeah.
if you get two of them, that's extra terminals. Second of all, there's other good cards that
Yeah.
you could be getting instead of Marauder, like, I don't know, Tournament. Um,
Tournament. And of course, like you're hitting five
and so then the
at
next
some
question
point.
is,
So
are you going for a workers' village draw thing? Are you not? Are you going for governor? Are you going for, like, what are your fives? And then do you want to get workers' villages to support those fives or not?
I am thinking that I am probably taking Jester or Relic as my first five,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to be playing. I so like okay, the Relic attack hurts a lot here,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of possibility that you just don't kick off, and the Relic is making that 1/5 more likely every turn you play it. So that's good, and also it's a silver, and silver looks like a good card on this board.
Mm-hmm.
So, but speaking of silver being a good card on this board, the
Silver
Jester
itself
is
is a
even
good
more
card.
of a
Oh.
junking threat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. There's also silver. But the Jester is also a thing, and like I want to be playing that Jester. It's going to be giving out possibly curses. It's going to be
Hmm.
giving out extra coppers. So
Hmm.
might be getting me good cards. But do I have time for any of that when they could just be governors and I could just be gaining a bunch of golds and buying as province as quickly as I can? I think
Mm-hmm.
that this is one of those boards where you get the province mostly to block your opponent's tournaments.
Mm-hmm. But
And
if you can line your own up, then fantastic.
all the
Um,
better. Yeah, great.
your
That's
first
added
prize
value, but it's
is
not why I got it. Yeah.
probably followers, but I'd also
That's
be
interesting.
happy
I
with
mean, it
Steed,
might be.
and this might be the rare case
I'd
where I
be
prefer Bag of Gold to Princess, really. Um,
Yeah, no, I was gonna say that Princess is not the bombshell here, I
and
don't think.
I guess we could
And
mention
I
that,
I
like,
think I like Bag of Gold quite a bit.
even though the big three are the big three, and we probably should have mentioned this earlier in the podcast, but this is why you listen even through the kingdom. Even though the
Yeah,
big three are
right.
the big
Yeah.
three, That basically it usually means one of those three should be the first prize in like 90% of games. But that doesn't mean that those three should be the first three that go in 90% of games, right? It's often
Sure.
that one of them is good and then one of the other things is good, or two of them are good but the third one isn't as good. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I think that like Trusty Steeds might see its silver gain powers engaged here,
and then you
depending how
combo
things
you
go.
combo the silver gain with the Annex, and it's a combo.
Yeah,
We did
there
it.
we go. You
No,
are
so
provincing that turn. Yeah,
I
so
think I think how I want to build this is I want to go Marauder Silver, and then I want to get
yes.
Tournament on every forecast, probably. Maybe Silver, but probably Tournament is mostly just going to be better. I'm going to get Relic on my first, like, 2 to 3 5 costs. I'm going to
That's
get
gonna,
Gold on
yeah,
6. I'm going to skip Governor. I might eventually get a governor if I have like just a ton of fives and I have a bunch of relics. I might get a jester if I think I can handle the terminal space, but I think jester looks worse than normal here because well, in general I think the stronger thing for jester is to be gaining good cards than giving bad cards, and you're less likely
let
to
me,
do that here. And also there's
I
just enough cards that you're going to hit in your opponent's deck that do like stone nothing that makes it a little bit
like
worse.
coppers. You're gonna be copper
Well,
junking them,
no,
which their
copper
deck
junking
doesn't
them
care about
is
really.
good. Is good. It doesn't do stone nothing. It
Yeah,
just doesn't do
it's
much.
fine.
I'm literally talking spoils
Yeah.
and ruins.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I was gonna say that the ruins. I forgot about the spoils. I was gonna say that the ruins are a thing, but they're also gonna be greening earlier than normal, so
That's
there's a
true.
decent chance you're cursing
That's
them with
true.
it.
And I
I
think,
mean,
I guess
the
particularly, I
yeah,
mentioned at some point the workers' village and draw cards thing to get your deck under control, but I think that won't really work because there's no trashing. The filtering with forum
I
is just
agree.
not good enough. You need to get a lot of villages and a lot of draw cards for it to come together, and I think it's just too slow and unreliable, particularly if you're getting junked by that Marauder.
I agree with you on like almost everything you said. I'm also opening Silver Marauder on a 5/2. I am opening
Cry.
probably Jester, nothing, and Cry.
Yep.
I could open Relic, nothing, and Cry as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, so am I taking the Jester, the Relic, or the Governor on any given five? And it's not an easy call.
Yeah.
It's really not.
I
I mean,
could
like,
see going
uh,
for a lot of governors being good.
now, skipping governor is a
But
really
it's
bold call, but I think you might be right.
but
I like
I could also see like getting one or two at some point.
it
Um
gets you province really quickly if you do decide provinces are important to be getting
yeah.
tournament prizes with. I don't know.
And it does work well with followers. It also gets your
It
opponent
does.
province quickly, and it makes them more likely to have a province in hand to block your tournament. So like there's some
Yeah.
downsides to drawing with governor too. I don't know. It's kind of thorny. It's pretty interesting to me. What is
Yeah,
the card which I
it
think is
is.
least likely to see an impact on this board? Uh,
Charm.
Interesting. I'm stuck. I'm actually torn between charm and the village draw
Uh,
combinations because I really don't think that can
well,
work.
I assume we're not talking about like a state or whatever. We're talking
The
about kingdom
state,
cards,
the
right?
state will
So,
probably be gained in this game.
sure. Yeah. Well, yes, the state
I
will be
mean,
gained.
I assume we're not talking
Uh,
about copper.
not
That's really the card that's
not on purpose. Right.
well. I mean,
So
it will
the
be
one
gained on
that
purpose. It's called followers, Jake.
yeah, the I think that the the card that will really not see play that is in the kingdom. I don't know. Most of this kingdom will see play at some point when we're experimenting, at the very least.
Yeah, I really don't
Probably
know.
Tragic Hero.
And
Tragic
any of
Hero is
I
actually
was gonna say
probably.
any of
I don't
them
know.
could be. I don't know. I mean, Tragic
It's
Hero.
hard.
Tragic Hero can gain you a relic. You could vaguely see doing some kind of a charm stack thing. Yeah, I don't really see it, but
Yeah, I think Charm is actually the most likely to be
I'm
the
gonna
ugly duckling
combo
in
my
this kingdom.
tournaments with Charm and Annex to empty the duchy pile.
There we
And
go.
we did it, Reddit.
Yeah. So yeah, I hmm, the more I think about it, the more I like Jester as the first five, unless I'm already
Oh,
over
wow.
terminal. Like
Well, I think
if I'm
I'm gonna have a, well, okay. I think on turn 1 or 2, I could see getting the Jester. I think because on a 3/4 I want to open Marauder, I think I'm over terminal to get a Jester very soon. Plus, I really like getting Relic. Like, I think
sure.
Relic is just so good. Also, I definitely
Yeah,
lean towards getting
Relic is hard to pass
multiple
up here.
relics before I get a Jester. The other thing is, of course, if I'm going to win a prize, I'm probably going to want to take followers, and if I do take if I'm going to want to take followers, I'd rather have more treasures than more terminals. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a
Okay. Okay.
thin, that's a pretty thin argument, but it pushes me ever so slightly more towards Relic.
I think you're kind of selling me on it too, because I was already leaning a little bit toward Relic between that and Jester. And yeah, your points are valid. So the Relic might just be the power five
So
here.
what you do
But
is you
the
open
turn
Workers
one,
Village
turn,
Silver,
yeah,
and then you just buy a bunch of Workers Villages and Tragic Heroes. You pop all your Tragic Heroes for charms. You get a bunch of charms all in play at the same time, and use them to empty out
somehow.
another stack of fivers from your Tragic Heroes. And then you use
Yeah.
them to empty out another stack of fivers, and boom, it's turn 28, and you've emptied the duchies. Oh yeah.
Nice. And that's assuming your opponent hasn't gotten any annexes.
Ooh,
So
yeah,
yeah, the annex. We were talking earlier about the annex split not even being real because you're allowed to
it's
buy
true.
annex when the
Duchies are
duchies are
empty.
gone, which
Yeah, and it still has its
makes it a
other
lot
effect, right?
stronger. Yeah, and it makes it a lot stronger than something like dominate or estate or some
Or Triumph,
or
right?
wild hunt or something or
Right,
triumph
because
because
Triumph,
it's
once
not
once the
tied to that
estates are gone,
pile.
Triumph doesn't do anything except gain you debt. And once the
Yeah.
provinces are gone, then Dominate doesn't do anything. Wait, the
So
game's over. Actually, I don't know. How is Dominate
well,
worded? Do you still get your 9 VP? I don't remember.
no, it's an if you did.
It's an if you did.
Yeah, you
Now I
cannot
know.
dominate. I mean,
You
you're
can't.
allowed to dominate, but yeah.
Right. So, like, if I want to reveal my trader to get a silver instead, I won't get my 9 VP.
I actually think you will because
No, because trader is
wait.
if you would. It's different from changeling.
Yeah, right. You're hurting my brain.
Edge cased.
Yeah, that's the name of the spin-off podcast, Edge Case, a Dominion podcast.
All right, I'm done.
All right. Yeah, no, me too. We pretty well covered it, and I would like to give you a little bit more hard and fast. What am I gonna do on this kingdom? But I have no idea. So we'll start. We'll find out. I think that these games are gonna take a long time.
I
Well, no,
think
are they? No, I think this game is gonna be fast. Actually,
I think
it's
it's
gonna be
going to be
fast
kind of
and
slow.
sloggy.
It is going to be sloggy. Adam's going to
Yeah.
hate us
Yeah. Right.
because this is like 1 hour and 54 minutes of recording.
Nice.
Woo!
Yeah. Well, he's not gonna have very much to edit because I have not sworn very much.
Well, I mean, you just did
So,
like 2 minutes ago.
yeah. So he'll have to listen to the whole thing to find them all.
Also, it's an
But
hour and 54 minutes long, so he's going to have to cut a bunch. That's why he's not really going to be happy.
yeah. Well, yeah, but it's gonna be pretty easy to find the stuff to cut. I think that, or it's just a long episode. I mean, we're fine with having episodes that go long.
He's sick. He
Whatever.
has time to do whatever, right? Right?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
I love you too, Adam.
All right. Marco, talk to you later.
Alexa, what do babies wear on their feet when they skateboard?
Smaller babies.
Minivans.